Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast. I'm your host Tyrone Marshall, joined by Samuel Luckhurst today. We are both back in San Diego after a whirlwind 20 hours or so in Houston. It's been the draining leg of United's US tour, I think it would be fair to say. Always, of course, a real privilege to follow the team on these tours, but the Tuesday game in San Diego against Wrexham, the Wednesday game in Houston against Real Madrid, the 3-hour flight on Wednesday and Thursday, the 2-hour time difference. It has been a real slog, I think, for everyone involved. But we are back in San Diego now for the last couple of days here before heading to Vegas. We obviously had the Wrexham game on Tuesday night. We'll maybe touch on that a little bit later on. Team of academy players, obviously, but somehow it became the story of the tour. But the real, in terms of interest, I guess, the main event was Real Madrid at the NRG Stadium in Houston, a phenomenal stadium. United beaten 2-0. I thought they played okay in patches, but kind of the same old issues really. They created very little, bordering on nothing. I mean, what was your views of the game and United's performance? Samuel?
I mean, I was not quite as enthusiastic as you during the game as you discovered. And what I've said it before, but what I like about Ten Hag is that even if they've won certain games, he'll still be quite critical of them, that they should have won more, they should have done this better or that better. He is very hard to please, but that's what United need. And he wasn't particularly he was positive in certain aspects of it. He said that they went toe to toe with a really good team. He said it was a complicated formation for Madrid. Madrid played with a 4-4-2, and they never really got to grips with that either. And that Vinicius would drift wide to be a winger, but he was one of the two up top, and he was terrific. And as I said, United never really got to grips with him. I thought Madrid were a lot more. They looked a lot quicker and slicker, and their pre-season had only started a few days earlier against AC Milan. But sometimes that can just be on the evening. Sometimes it's just the quality you have in your team. You look at the quality Madrid have, and that they are objectively a better team than United. There's a reason why United looked at Camavinga, looked at Tchouaméni, looked at Bellingham, the three players that they considered or really, really wanted to sign. They didn't sign them. They've all gone to Madrid, and sometimes that difference can be apparent in a game. But they did have opportunities to at least draw it. I mean, Marcus Rashford playing up top, I always think it's a bit of a waste of time, because he's just not a striker, and he's shown what a brilliant. I think he can be world class really when he's playing from the left and when he's at his optimum. And you might as well just continue trialing Jadon Sancho there, who was developing some momentum, some rhythm, because Sancho is not going to play on the left the way it's going. You've got Rashford there, you've got Garnacho there. And when the chance did come to Rashford, and it was interesting, I think he touched upon it in the Q&A had with Gary Neville, when he said that you can go like 10 minutes or 20 minutes without touching the ball as striker, and then you've got to be ready to score if a chance comes your way. And when that chance did come to him, his first touch was heavy, and then the keeper came out and did quite well to block the shot. So, I mean, the Real Madrid's two goals that were high quality goals, the chip from Bellingham and Joslu's volley late on, but I didn't ever get the sense that United were really peppering the Madrid goal. They had a couple of good chances. I mean, Garnacho should have done better with a shot that went over. And I mean, I think there were three players that Ten Hag mentioned afterwards. It was Rashford, Garnacho and McTominay. Maybe quite harsh on McTominay, because he'd gone on a Vinicius-like run to get himself into position to have a shot at goal. But he regarded it as a one-on-one, and the shot was too close to the keeper. But I thought that Andre Nana was probably the busier of the two goalies. So for all the play United had and all their interplay, they didn't have a lot to show for it, and they certainly didn't have any goals to show for it. And we're back in that area. That it's that same theme as last season. This recurring theme of they are going to struggle to score goals, and they might still struggle to score goals if they get their number 9 in because of Højlund's hit rate. But they need a focal point up there. And if Højlund provides that focal point and he gets, 10 or 15 goals a season, but everyone around him, their numbers are going up, then great, that probably justifies his existence. But whether it's a competitive game or a friendly game, that is still a big bugbear for Ten Hag. And I think they've had four pre-season matches now. and was it four goals, isn't it?
Yeah.
1-0 win against Leeds, 1-0 win against Lyon.
2-0 against Leeds.
2-0. Was it 2-0? Yes, it was 2-0 against Leeds. Sorry, so five and four. And you look at the identity of some of those goal scorers, they're not going to get a kick for United at competitive level, and that might just be Donny van der Beek people think I'm referring to, but I'm actually referring to Joe Hugel and Noah Memorand. So they really need to address that. They are trying to address that, I suppose, but I think when you come up against a high quality team like Madrid, it's always good for your preparation, in that you're coming up against best in class really in some of their positions, whether it's a young midfielder in Bellingham or an old midfielder in Modric. That is going to be beneficial, which is why it's such a shame that Kobbie Mainoo fell out as early as he did.
Yeah, excuse me. I think we were all surprised in a way to see Kobbie Mainoo on the team sheets for a game like that, but it shows how well he's been doing, and I think it shows that he's probably above McTominay, Fred and Van der Beek in the pecking order now. But yeah, the goals are a real issue. I think we've seen Ten Hag do some fairly interesting things tactically this pre-season. The Arsenal game, we touched on the fullbacks being so high and central, almost as number 8s. You could see against Real Madrid that with Andre Onana coming in, who we'll touch on in a minute, they could just play so high really, that it was such a high line, everything was so compact that they almost ended up attacking with 6 players. You had Mount and Eriksen really. Fernandes was on the wing, but Mount and Eriksen playing as number 8s, number 10s next to each other. There was a lot of players in attacking positions, but just not really making it work when it comes to goals and creating chances. I think I think Andre Lunin made 3 saves maybe, but they were all from fairly long range. I know McTominay's was closer
Rashford's
in.
was slightly close.
He was closer in. And Mount in the first half, of course. I think he was a little bit off balance. McTominay as well, I think, was off balance after that long run. But in terms of goalkeepers, the fascination was with one man really, and that was Andre Onana. I wrote in a piece, it was a revolution basically in goal compared to what we're used to with David De Gea. Onana just playing, he was midway through the half at the very least when the ball was in Real Madrid's half, touching on the centre circle at times. Pretty much every pass, I would say, went short. It was just completely different to what we're used to watching with United goalkeepers, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I suppose the irony of Bellingham's goal was that if Onana had not come off his line, he wouldn't have got beaten in that way, and it might still have been 0-0. But you wouldn't necessarily discourage that. You wouldn't say he was necessarily at fault for it either. I mean, it was an immaculate first touch from Bellingham, and then the chip, which he made look ridiculously easy, was perfect as well. Even just the way it went over and hit the bottom of the net first rather than bouncing in. But he made a couple of very good saves. He was proactive. He came a long way off his line, I think, for a header later on in the second half that did go to a Madrid player, but he wasn't punished for it. I thought it was quite an encouraging first appearance for him in a United shirt. He's not afraid to be on a teammate's case either. He had a moan at Wan-Bissaka at one point. He was quite demonstrative with Lisandro Martinez as well, who obviously he'll know from his Ajax days. So on first impressions, I think you couldn't not be impressed really with the way he conducted himself, and he's going to have to make his presence felt in that defence as well because he's new to it. It helps immeasurably that he speaks English. I mean, when De Gea came to United, he was 20 and he couldn't speak English, and that was always going to be a barrier, especially when the defence back then was quite anglicised. I mean, it's not these days. It's actually quite, I think there was this Latino rebranding of it last season by Ten Hag. It's obviously been tweaked now with Onana coming in. He's got Wan-Bissaka as the starting right back, who of course he's not an England international, but he's grown up in England. And I think when again in a game like that, you don't want a keeper who's going to be a shrinking violet, and he wasn't. I mean, it was quite a big crowd, 60,000, Man United, Real Madrid, and Ten Hag had spoken before about his character and how he likes a challenge, and I thought that was pretty evident really. When he had to deal with things, he dealt with them very well. His passing was quite polished. There was a point in the second half, I think, where he held onto the ball a little bit longer. Vinicius were coming closer and closer, and he just popped it off. And you knew when he was in that position, he wasn't going to cock it up either. He knew exactly what he was doing. And then and from his perspective, there's method to it, because the longer he holds on to it, obviously the players coming closer, and if you can get it past him, which you knew Onana was going to do, you take him out of play, and it frees up space for a teammate. So first impressions, quite impressed really. It's unfortunate for him that United lost 2-0, but I think, as I said in my match piece, he showed why they signed him despite the defeat.
Absolutely. And I guess we'll just touch on the Wrexham game briefly as well. I think that's probably all from for Real Madrid. I mean, the only thing of interest from the Madrid game, like you said, was Bellingham. I mean, he really looked like one that got away for United, doesn't he? Obviously, they tried to woo him in 2020, gave him the tour of Carrington. He decided to go to Dortmund. He just looks, to the man of ball, looks a phenomenal footballer, a brilliant talker as well. He spoke in the mix zone after the game about his clash with Martinez and was really, really good on it, really entertaining on it. And he just looks like a world-class midfielder, and as good as United's midfield is now, as much as it's improved since 2020, I think if they had Jude Bellingham, he would still be the first name on the team sheet. And then moving on to the Wrexham game. I mean, I guess the takeaway from that was Nathan Bishop, wasn't it? And the Paul Mullen injury, not great goalkeeping, and an unfortunate incident. There was obviously no malice in it. It was just probably poor decision making, but it became kind of a big story over here, didn't it?
It did, yeah. I didn't think any of us ever anticipated Nathan Bishop going viral ever in his United career. He's never had that exposure. He's never going to be in the first team. He's never going to get a kick at competitive level. One wouldn't have thought, but it was a poor challenge. And sometimes when you're watching a friendly, the referee's going to offer some leeway, but I thought in the Arsenal game there were quite a lot of bookings, and there were quite a lot of bookings in the Wrexham game as well. And with the Bishop challenge, I mean, I think the referee probably realised as during this lengthy stoppage for Mullen, and seeing Mullen getting an oxygen mask, that I've cocked up there, I should have sent him off, and that might have accounted for his daft decision to dismiss Dan Gore in the second half, because that wasn't a red card. That was a really, really poor decision. But there's been some back and forth in it, in that some of us went over. We were waiting in the mix zone, and some of us went over and spoke to Phil Parkinson, and having seen Phil Parkinson on the Disney Plus documentary, and some chats. Post-match chats after National League games. I think it was the infamous one when they lost the playoffs last year. I suspected that he'd come out with a line, and he certainly did, when he said that Nathan Bishop should steer clear of us. Mm-hmm. And United weren't happy with that, understandably, because they feel as though that fuels online abuse. I mean, when Bishop put out a tweet airing his apology to Mullen, he turned the comments off on it, which was wise. I mean, I couldn't even recall him actually sending a tweet, Nathan Bishop. So he clearly wanted to get the message out there. He has spoken to Paul Mullen. They are represented by the same agency, and also quite a nice touch from Ryan Reynolds to reach out for him. Reynolds wasn't at the game; he's been in London filming. Ben Foster went into the United dressing room as well, and kind of consoled Bishop as well, because when we saw him afterwards, he did look quite disconsolate. And I'm not saying people should feel massively sorry for him, because obviously the prime concern is Mullen, and that he recovers from really nasty injury. I mean, getting a punctured lung is, I can't imagine what that feels like. But I think we all sensed it was serious, because when it first happened, I thought, oh god, that looks dreadful. Then the replay showed that it wasn't it wasn't a head injury. So you thought, well, great, he's not concussed. But if he's taken a bang to the ribs, you're thinking cracked rib, God knows what, and it turns out to be a punctured lung. So it seems like he's recovering quite well, which is the main thing. I mean, he's Wrexham's talisman, so that's why it's going to particularly sting for them. And Bishop then, whenever he got the ball, he got booed by the crowd, and then he was substituted at half time. Then Radek Vitek came on, and he got booed as well. I think some of the United staff had even were kind of jokingly taking wages on whether the crowd would cotton on that Bishop had been replaced, and a lot of them hadn't. But I think that's it's kind of par for the course out here in America, that sometimes you enjoy yourself so much at a game you're not the most attentive, and I think we've seen quite a lot of casual soccer fans. It's safe to say they're very passionate soccer fans over here as well, but there were definitely some casual Johnny-come-latelys, to put it bluntly, regarding not just United's fortunes in recent times, but also Wrexham. So it was a good news story for us. It certainly made the occasion worth attending, because I think some of us were wondering, well, it's just an academy team coming up against Wrexham, but it was a good crowd, and it was quite a watchable contest as well, even though United lost that one as well. It's a good learning curve for their young players coming up against a team who are on the up, and who play a very aggressive style of football, and it's a very direct and different style of football to what those United Academy players will have been used to, as we saw with the goals. One was a cross, another one was a long throw that could have gone into a different time zone, getting flicked from near post to far post, and I think the third goal was a cross as well. Those are learning curves for young players that will help them. Sometimes it's more helpful to actually lose a game like that rather than win it.
Yeah, definitely. That is all for part one of the Manchester is Red podcast. We'll be back after the break to talk transfers and strikers. Welcome back to the Manchester is Red podcast. Myself, Tyrone Marshall, and Samuel Luckhurst in San Diego. One of the recurring themes of this tour, we just talked about it in the first half, is United's lack of goals. One of the recurring news stories is the striker search. That is the next deal in the pipeline. I think it'd be fair to say they've got a goalkeeper and a midfielder in now, £100 million on those two. A striker is next. Which striker is the question? All roads seem to lead to Rasmus Højlund at the moment, which I think there's some surprise on their stance, I think, on Harry Kane and the way United are maybe going about the search for a striker. But in terms of actually what's happening, I mean, what is the situation with Rasmus Højlund at the moment and United's chase for him, Samuel?
Well, PSG have made a bid, haven't they? That came out yesterday. I'm sure it will be made official sooner rather than later that United have made their own bid. United seem, I think the fact that John Murtough has been out here, he's been in New Jersey, San Diego and Houston. Yeah. I think that gives you an idea of the confidence at the club that they don't feel the need to have presence in Bergamo to hold additional discussions with Atalanta officials, because Murtough has done that already. And there is a confidence at United that they will sign a striker in time for the Wolves game, and that striker is Rasmus Højlund. They have got some others who are being kept on ice on the off chance that the Højlund deal doesn't happen. I think with PSG, I half wonder whether they've done their proper due diligence there, because I'd be surprised if Højlund jumps at the chance and decides to go there, because United have gone so far down the line with Højlund. They must be pretty confident of getting it over the line, and they are. And Højlund has spoken to Ten Hag. That happened about 2 months ago at the very least. If that's happened and United is still in this position where he is their principal striker target, you wouldn't be wasting your time on that. So although PSG have come in for Højlund, I don't think that's going to unnerve United greatly, and it would just be a case of negotiating a final fee that Atalanta are happy with. I mean, they've dealt with them quite recently, a few years ago over the Ahmad deal, which was, I think, 19 million rising to 37 million pounds, and United have said that they won't go over 60 million pounds, which I think is fair. But if they do pay over that, they're going to look a bit daft now, because Højlund's price, Atalanta could try and hold out for a higher fee because PSG have come in for him, which might be the only thing that does affect United's own approach and their own package for Højlund. But I think everybody, for those of us out here on the tour, the way United, all the noises coming out of United, there's. I think we all expect Højlund to end up at United next season, and United are talking about getting him in time for the Wolves game on August 14th, which is just over 2 weeks away. I think that's pretty doable as well. Again, they're so far down the line with Højlund. There's clearly this confidence that they will get it over the line, as I just said. So I just suppose now we're in this territory where it will be bid submitted, personal terms agreed, bid accepted, he's flying over, he's having his medical, he's had the first half of his medical, the second half of his medical. It wouldn't surprise me if it gets to that. I hope it does, because I could do without it collapsing and then United scrambling around trying to sign another striker. But they have got, I think, the two who are of interest as alternative targets are Randall Kolo Muani and Mohamed Kudus. So it's not like they've gone all in on Højlund, but as we said earlier, the other day in fact, the big pressure on him, I think, if or when he joins United, it's not so much that he's going to be leading the line for United, he's going to be leading the line for United in the summer that Harry Kane has also left Tottenham. Yeah. Because he's always going to be compared to him. And I don't think anybody is expecting Højlund to score more goals than Kane next season. And look, if Kane's in the Bundesliga, that's fair enough. But if there's a big gap in terms of their goals output and Højlund struggles to cut it in his first season, that is going to be a stick used to beat United with for quite a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. The Kane thing, United and everyone who speaks to United is absolutely adamant they are not going for Harry Kane. But I think if he goes to Bayern Munich and they don't make an effort for it, as we've said before, it's going to look bizarre, really. And Højlund, Ten Hag wanted a striker, he wanted a proven striker, someone that could come in and be a guarantee of goals. I don't think Rasmus Højlund is that. The word that was used the other day was, I think, a rough diamond, basically, someone that Ten Hag is going to polish up and almost signing a young player that they know that they're hoping Ten Hag can improve. But I don't think Rasmus Højlund at 20, who scored 9 goals in Serie A last season, I don't think he was always a regular starter for Atalanta. No. It is a huge ask for someone like that to come in and lead the line for Man United. And as talented a footballer as he might be, there might be spells next season where he needs to come out of the team. There might be spells where Marcus Rashford has to play through the middle, where Anthony Martial has to play through the middle. There is undoubtedly, I think, an element of risk with this deal, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, an agent I spoke to the other day, they said it's a huge gamble, and in fairness, they'd called it a while ago. They said that they thought that United would go for Højlund or Muani. They seem to be in that second tier of strikers that they looked at after they decided that Kane and Victor Osimhen were no-goes. But it's not a signing that elevates them to title challenging status. And if they'd signed Kane, you're immediately looking at that team and you think, okay, you should be going for the league this season. You weigh up the pros and cons, but ultimately, when you've got Harry Kane in your team, it should make you better. His age is irrelevant. He's a world class striker, and he's been a world class striker for probably 7 or 8 years, maybe. With Højlund, there'll be method to it, because United have looked at other strikers in recent years who were developed in Austria. I mean, Erling Haaland, Benjamin Sesko, and now you've got Rasmus Højlund. That I don't think that's coincidence. I think there's got to be a conscious decision to do that and to look at players and to that they must have a liking for the Austrian league and what they're doing there as well with young prodigies who play up front. They're all three of them are strikers, and I think with Sesko last year, Ten Hag would have liked him. I mean, I think there was Brian Brobby as well, wasn't it? At the start of the summer, who got a mention. And I suppose the only surprise with Højlund is that I look at his profile, his CV, and I don't see anything related to the Netherlands or the Eredivisie. But he is represented by Ten Hag's agent. We should hasten to add. So, as I said, that it is going to be a lot on his shoulders. The pressure of coming to United. I mean, I don't think anything can really quite prepare someone that young for the scrutiny he's going to be under. There are two positions in the team that are the most scrutinised above all others, and that's goalkeeper and striker. And if you're not cutting it in either, there are going to be calls for you to be cut, effectively.
Yeah.
And United don't want to be in that position where they look at Højlund and they think he's going to have to come out of the team. He's not, he's struggling, and we're going to have to put Anthony Marshall in, because then you're just regressing. Look, United have also said as well that in terms of his fee, it's this whole tight budget thing, profitability and sustainability rules, and complying with them. It's that they can get players out this summer and in the winter transfer window to balance the books, and that leads me to think, well, that suggests that you have a little bit more money than you're letting on, and somebody had told me that as well. They said that United were almost like pleading poverty to clubs just to rein in spending and not overspend. And look, if that works, then that's a good negotiation tactic. But with a striker, I always felt that they had to pay close to £100 million. Now, Højlund is not worth that, and they shouldn't be going anywhere near that. But I also doubt whether they should be going for Højlund, just because I look at the package and I'm not sure that's the profile of striker they should be going for, to elevate them to a greater standing on the domestic front or the European front. I mean, they finished third last season. They had a successful season. But if you want to kick on, you need real high caliber signings, and I certainly think Onana fits the bill. Mount, Ten Hag wanted him. Ten Hag's got him. He's aligned with Ten Hag. Fair enough. Speaking from my own opinion, I wouldn't have necessarily said he was the midfielder to go for, but Ten Hag has got his man there, and it seems like with Højlund he'd get his man as well. But the one he really, in an ideal world, the one he would have is Kane, and there's a massive difference. I mean, you've got a 30-year-old striker who's been proven season after season after season. You've got a 20-year-old striker who's had about 2 transfers in the last 2 years, going from was it Copenhagen, I think he was at, then Sturm Graz, and then Sturm Graz to Atalanta, and he's not been playing at clubs of massively high pedigree either. I know Atalanta have got a very good reputation for developing young players, but that is primarily through their academy, and Højlund, he didn't join their academy, he went to their first team, and he's only spent a year there, so good luck to him if he goes to United, because it's if he can shoulder the responsibility, then they'll have done all right. And people at United say he wants to work hard, and I think they clearly like the look of him as well. So it'll be fascinating to see how it goes, that's for certain. I don't think we'll be short of things to write about when he comes in. No, definitely. I think this does feel like the biggest transfer gamble they have taken under Ten Hag so far, given how important a position it is for the future. And you just can't spend 60 million on a striker and then splash out 60 million on another next year if it goes wrong. And I guess the one maybe hope in an ideal scenario for United is that they sign Højlund and Kane stays at Tottenham and they get Kane on a free next year. But I think that's looking unlikely the way the Kane deal is moving, and maybe going to Bayern Munich. You mentioned outgoings there. I mean, like I say, it's interesting. United feel they can spend again on Højlund before selling. I think there is probably a bit of crying wolf about FFP to bring prices down. But in terms of outgoings, I guess Dean Henderson's potentially the next one, and the unknown is Scott McTominay. West Ham obviously interested in him. The picture may have changed on that. We're recording this Friday in San Diego, Friday morning. It's a day off for United, the one day off of the tour for United players and staff today. We will be speaking to Ten Hag tomorrow, and obviously KB Mainoo got injured, as we said, in Houston. Scott McTominay suffered a knee injury at the very end of the game as well. He did walk away, but those two things could complicate outgoings. But it feels like McTominay is one to watch, isn't he, in terms of a departure? Definitely. And although Mainoo left with a protective boot on, and he was on crutches as well, unfortunately, it might be severe, it might not be. I mean, Ahmad left on crutches in New Jersey last week, and then he was running a few days later, and he was on the bench for the Madrid game the other night. It's probably not helped him in terms of his progress, because he didn't even play 15 minutes against Arsenal, and then he didn't play at all against Madrid the other evening. But I thought Mainoo's, even though it's pre-season, I thought Mainoo's selection or his retention rather against Madrid was significant.
Yeah.
That Ten Hag brought Casemiro in. Mount obviously started as well and moved further up. But all of a sudden you're looking at Mainoo and you're thinking, is he it looks like he's a third or fourth choice midfielder now for United. And I think this year alone, he's overtaken Iqbal, who's gone. He's overtaken Fred, who is going. And it looks like he's briefly, or maybe it won't be briefly, but he's overtaken McTominay, who could also be going. If Mainoo's got a severe injury, then that definitely impacts what United do with McTominay, because at that point, I mean, a club have got to stump up about £40 million for him. I don't think McTominay is necessarily that valuable, and there might be a compromise there. Maybe that's just the starting fee that United are going to float out there and see what comes of it. But I always thought that if you get 30 million from McTominay, you'll have done well. He's not started a lot of games for United in the last year under Ten Hag either, and I think that's something that clubs will be aware of, and they will go to United and say, well, look, you clearly this guy is not he's not exactly a key member of Ten Hag's squad. But if Mainoo's injured, I don't see how they proactively go about selling McTominay, and I don't think they are going about it proactively with him, because he is one of those players that if he stays, fine, good. He has purpose as a squad player, and that is his ceiling at United. He's a rotational player, he's a squad member. But if Mainoo's fit and they do get a good fee for McTominay, then great, then you accept it, because then you can actually strengthen your squad and bring a specialist defensive midfielder in, because McTominay is not a defensive midfielder, and I think Ten Hag, it's pretty laudable in the way that he seems to want to do this sooner rather than later. He's looked at parts of the squad and he's thought, I need two midfielders who are not going to compromise the way we play. If Eriksen's starting or Mount starting, there's symmetry there. And if Casemiro falls out of the team, I don't want to be in a position where I'm looking for a stopgap defensive midfielder. I want a specialist there. And that could be the case if they get McTominay off the books, and then they can strengthen that part of the squad. So again, it's certainly one to watch. Henderson, I think we will still just expect him to go, and the likelihood will be that United bring a goalkeeper in. I mean, Suzuki, the Japanese keeper, is someone that United really like, but I don't think they necessarily see him as number 2 material straight away, and it would be a big ask for a 20-year-old coming to Man United, and the possibility of Onana getting injured and having a long run of games. That's a very different situation they'd be in from one where they've got Onana, who came through the Barcelona academy, played at Ajax, played at Inter Milan, very, very experienced goalkeeper. And we're still not necessarily sure about Tom Heaton. There could be some movement there, but I think that Heaton would actually serve a purpose as a number 2 for one more year. I think he's up to it. He's experienced as well, and I certainly think that Ten Hag would be loath to letting him go, because he is not going to want some callow goalkeepers as cover for Onana.
Definitely. That's all for the second part. We'll be back, the final part of the Manchester is Red podcast, after this break to talk about Vegas. Welcome back to the Manchester is Red podcast. We're on the home straight now as far as United's US tour is confirmed. United's got one more day in San Diego. Like I say, it's a day off today on Friday. They'll be training on Saturday before they fly to Las Vegas Saturday evening and face Borussia Dortmund at 6 p.m. local time on Sunday. Not even sure if they're training in Vegas or whether it is just the game. It's not weather that is conducive to training, it would be fair to say. The temperatures in Vegas at the moment are around 44, 45 degrees, so the stadium will be air conditioned, but it's not temperatures you want to do much activity in terms of a training ground or anything like that. So I'm not sure if they'll even be training there, whether it's just the game at the Allegiant Stadium. They're playing Borussia Dortmund. Dortmund are actually in San Diego at the moment. They played at the Snapdragon last night against the local team, San Diego Loyal, who are not even an MLS side. San Diego are getting an MLS franchise in a couple of years, but San Diego Loyal play in the league below that. Dortmund, none of us went, of course. It was not an event to write home about, but Dortmund won 6-0. It feels like all the stories in terms of the Dortmund team have pretty much gone now with Bellingham and Haaland. They have signed Marcel Sabitzer, of course, so it'll be a reunion for him, but all the focus in Vegas will be on United. In terms of a team, what are we expecting? I guess we're at that point now where Ten Hag is going to start playing his strongest team and his most likely team in this game, and we may know out it's probably a Casemiro, Mount, Fernandes midfield and bring a winger in to start. And we saw players play 60 minutes in Houston generally, apart from Fernandes who played 90. He's a bit of a machine, but we're at the point where players are up in their minutes and it's more about those patterns of play rather than just fitness, isn't it?
Yeah, that was certainly one of the takeaways from the Madrid game. It wasn't wholesale changes at half time, and I don't think any of us were necessarily expecting it either. The way United were playing, there was a decent intensity about the game as well, and a good competitive edge as we saw with the clash between Bellingham and Martinez. So I can see something similar in Las Vegas. It's not as though the players are going to be playing in punishing heat. That stadium only opened about 2 or 3 years ago, so I'm very much looking forward to seeing what it's like for one. But one would imagine it will be state of the art. It mainly hosts the football team, doesn't it? I can't even remember their name now. Yeah. They were the Oakland Raiders, but now I take it are they Las Vegas Raiders?
It rings a bell, but yeah, I'm not.
I can picture the logo is certainly very recognisable. But with, I suppose, one of the other things about it, and again, it wasn't exactly a revelation, but Wan-Bissaka is very much. I mean, you spoke to him. You did an interview with him that will be published at a later date. He's clearly the favoured right back at the moment. Which, with Dalot, he had 5 poor months and he got a 5-year contract. And I get it. I think he was actually worthy of a new contract, but the length of it did seem quite excessive, and that has certainly been an issue United have had, in that they'll be a bit too knee-jerk with contract renewals and giving players too many years and then all of a sudden, it's not exactly a long way down the line. They're in a bit of a pickle with them because they're a sellable. They're not playing that much and they might want to leave, but then the length of the contract can be quite prohibitive. I suppose at least this year, there are a lot more clubs interested in United players. Last year, they couldn't even shift Ronaldo last year. They didn't have any sellable assets. It seemed like all of them were unsellable because of the dreadful season that had gone on and they'd all been part of. But with Wan-Bissaka, he's rebuilt his reputation. He's had a pretty good year. I still have my doubts on him as a long term. I don't think he's at the level. I don't think he will ever be at the level United need for right back in this era. He's trying. He's moving into midfield. He's trying to follow Ten Hag's instructions, and there have been some good signs. But he did get a bit of a chasing the other night from Vinicius, and again, that wasn't just his fault. United didn't really quite know how to handle that Madrid formation. Casemiro was off the pace as well, and that left them very, very vulnerable. They were quite porous, particularly in the first half. So Dortmund are a different entity. As we've said time and again, they're not the team they were. I mean, they should have won the Bundesliga last season. They still choked on the final day, and they're not as interesting a team now either because Jude Bellingham isn't there. So all those young prodigies, they seem to have moved on to bigger and better things. There are a couple still lingering. I think it's Jamie Bino Gittins who went from Manchester City, and I remember watching him in a youth, I can't remember what the competition was, but it was at Leeds Sports Village, so it was definitely a youth team game a couple of years ago, and he was very, very good. So he's followed the same path as Jadon Sancho, but Sabitzer went there for I think about £16 million, which was around the amount we thought, that the fee that we thought he would command, and was that always going to be worth United's while when they've got other specialist targets? The suspicion all along was that the answer would be no to that, and obviously they've not bothered signing him, and they will certainly not be signing Wout Weghorst on a permanent basis either. I think he was booed, wasn't he? By
Burnley fans. Yeah.
The other day, he's not exactly popular up in rural Lancashire. So I mean, it's the final game of the tour. It's strange in that the first time haven't actually played that many games on this tour. No. Normally, when you do a US tour, it's 2 weeks. It's minimum 4 games. I think on the previous 2 I did, I think it was 5 games. So for United to only play 3 games, there's only one man who's responsible for that, and that's Ten Hag, and that's the way he wants it. So that they've obviously got the 2 games against Lens and Athletic Bilbao back at Old Trafford, and then in Dublin next week as that final bit of preparation for the new Premier League season. I suppose with this one they'll just want to end the tour on a high. It'd be a bit of a dampener if they lose that one, having lost to Madrid as well. Yeah,
definitely. I was going to touch on that. I mean, we've spoken a lot this tour, maybe not on the podcast, about how Ten Hag is focused on that football, that training element, and just that real attention to detail and things like that, and cutting commercial days down. It's a funny old tour with the under-21s game. It was, that was sold as a young Manchester United team. I mean, they're not going to want to end this tour having lost 3 of their 4 games, and it's obviously, you don't read too much into pre-season. Ten Hag's got enough credit in the bank to avoid dramatic pre-season conclusions because they've lost a few friendlies, but they will want to sort of rebuild some of their momentum after this week, and losing twice in 24 hours, even if it was 2 very different teams.
Yeah, and he touched upon that with the Wrexham game as well. He was asked about it at his post-match press conference in Houston, and he was even a little bit critical of that, but he said that the experience is losing that can be more helpful than winning. But I think he did actually say that they were quite disappointed with the performances of some of the youngsters, and those are the standards that United should be adhering to. You don't want a manager who's just going to brush off a defeat or just laugh it off. There's one who came to mind, and he happened to be Ten Hag's permanent predecessor, who could be a bit clumsy in situations like that. But as I've said all along, that's one of Ten Hag's biggest strengths is how hot he is on standards dropping, and he will call out the players on it, and he won't do it individually. I suppose the other night he did name 3 players who should have scored a goal, but it wasn't exactly singling out a player for really harsh criticism like Mourinho might have done. He wasn't exactly throwing them under the bus, but he has standards, and there were some of the youngsters in that Wrexham game did all right. Some of them just they're never going to get a look in at United, and there's no shame in that necessarily. But I think one's right to be disappointed in certain players at times. I mean, Joe Hugel had a very, very good first season in the academy. Second season he got injured, and unfortunately that meant that he didn't really get a look in that youth cup team, so the timing was particularly dreadful there. But I'm not even necessarily sure it's regression with him. I mean, I thought he was a pretty good nimble striker when I first saw him, but now he looks very separate from the way the rest of the team play. And Ten Hag spoke at UCSD about drawing a line down from the first team down, so that every team at every level plays the same way, which is completely logical in the way United should have been operating for years. But there's not been a consistent pattern because of different managers, and that's changed now with Ten Hag coming in. It's not coincidence. It's a former Ajax manager who is insisting on that, and the warm up in San Diego for that Wrexham game, they were the same drills as the first team as well. So that is reassuring for United, that they won. That this identity crisis that they've been mired in for so many years, that is definitely easing under Ten Hag. And if you're not in sync with the way everyone else plays, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb. And unfortunately, Hugel, in the games I've watched him, I know he scored in Oslo, but he seems quite immobile. that there aren't many patterns that he's developing with teammates there either. But it's a good experience for him, and he's been kept on for the tour as well. I imagine because Anthony Elanga has gone to Nottingham Forest permanently now, and Ten Hag said we need the numbers, so they've still got quite a bloated squad out here. Really, I think it's 33 players. He's been up to with Hugill and Johnny Evans.
Yeah, so the Dortmund game, early hours of Monday morning UK time, Sunday evening 6 p.m. local time over here. Of course, we'll have plenty of content on our YouTube channel for that through Monday for you. All the usual coverage on the Manchester Evening News website. We'll be back for a podcast probably before we leave Las Vegas, so probably Monday afternoon UK time. So keep an eye on that as well, and do give us a like and a follow and all of that. But for now, that is all from San Diego, and we will be back with you soon. Thank you for tuning in.